we getting a 2-month reprieve, but as I understand it from the statement made by yourselves and Mineral Resources and Energy, whereas before we were able to cover the costs of this from the strategic oil reserves, we're not able to do that this time. So a 4.5 billion rand loss to Treasury. Is this the last time, do you think, that Treasury is going to be able to do this?
Yes, John, we are worried about the fiscal framework. Obviously, we need to protect the fiscal framework, but we think we can get by this extension because it's 150 for next month and 75 cents for the following month.
Right.
So that comes to 4.5 billion. And, there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and due to the Russian invasion, and we think that there will be negative news and there may be some positive news. So we can afford to wait till October to make a final decision to what extent we need to take other steps to fund this loss in fuel revenue.
So, Mr. Momoniat, I mean, my understanding of the situation is part of it is situational, as you've just mentioned, the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the consequences for global fuel supply flowing out of that, or not flowing in many instances. And then there's structural stuff which the country's still grappling to get our heads around. Are we making progress on the latter, where we might be getting closer to making some tough decisions, for example, around a more competitive environment in which people can choose where they buy their fuel?
So, John, look, that falls in the domain of the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, and they've certainly, we announced 2 months ago that there were certain levies that they were going to scrap, which they are doing now, the 10 cents levy and the other 3 cents levy. I know those are relatively small compared to the price, and there was a commitment to remove the cap on 93 octane, I think it's called.
Right.
So I think those measures are moving towards a more competitive situation. But, even if you were to move in that direction, the fact of the matter is that the two big drivers are obviously the price of Brent crude oil on international markets and the rand-dollar exchange rate. And of course, yes, we do have a plethora of taxes. Many people, and I want to emphasize, every state has a right to impose a tax. Which tax it imposes can be up for discussion, but we need to have a diversity of tax sources because obviously the government needs revenue. So those three factors drive the price.
So that 4.5 billion rand, do you have any early sense of what's going to be cut to make that, ensure that doesn't dent areas of extreme need?
So, John, we don't intend to cut any expenditure at this stage, nor do we intend to borrow more, because as I said, we'll review the situation during the October MTPPS. We suspect that there'll be some forces that may be positive that will reduce the fiscal gap that's arisen because of us lowering the fuel tax for 2 more months.
Of course, one of the things that happens is that other prices go up anyway. I suppose there's no way of making some sort of appeal to people who do defend increases in the price of other goods against a rising fuel price to at least ask them to stay their hand. Do you think that would be a reasonable call? I know that's not something that Treasury can do, but is it your view that this is a time where everybody tries to keep a lid on things while hopefully the worst of these times pass?
So, John, I guess, you hope that certainly on the wages side that there might be some restraint. But, when you look at the extent of these increases, just before you were talking about, for example, the taxi industry and so on.
Right.
I mean, these increases have been substantial, and I would imagine that it's difficult for them to continue to operate at the old prices. Of course, the problem we face is that once there's an increase in prices, as we say in economic jargon, these prices tend to be sticky. They go up,
Yes.
but they don't come down as easily.
Yes.
And of course, that fuels inflation. And as it is, we are living now in an era of rising inflation in the US, UK, and if you look at the last monetary policy meeting, our inflation trends are also up. So those themselves will, mean further pressure on households.
I know this wouldn't be your decision to make, but I'm just going to throw this idea out. I mean, we often are urged as citizens to get involved in the fight against corruption. Is there an argument to be made for all the money that gets recovered by the SIU and others to actually go into a fuel price rise mitigation fund and not into the general government pot where skeptics say it's likely to be abused again?
Yeah, no, John, that is in my domain, and certainly with tax policy, the issue is that there must be confidence that when we raise taxes, that the money is spent properly.
Right.
And certainly, when it comes to corruption, unfortunately, corruption comes at the end of the process and not at the start. So even if you were to recover the funds, which, by the way, is difficult because it takes time sometimes to uncover corruption.
Right.
And those who steal are very efficient at spending the money quickly. But, even if you were to recover it, these tend to be once off. And the petrol price is like a flow. It's there all the time. So, the proceeds of corruption might bring down debt, for example, but hardly sort of deal with your ordinary operating expenses or continual expenditure that you have.
Thank you very much. Ismail Mamoniat, Deputy Director General at National Treasury. So some reprieve. It will be 2 months long. You heard him say, hopefully, there will be better global circumstances and a more competitive market for Brent crude and the refined products on which we so heavily depend. Time will tell.
News.
Experts.
Analysis.
Where things stand.
What you need to know. Drive home with John Perlman
On 702.